I'm going to show you a brand new workflow for using AI that I think is actually a brilliant way to use AI to write your books. And it has a number of advantages that I will get to at the end of this video, so stick around for that. So first of all, full credit where credit is due. I first heard about this workflow from my friend Kevin McLaughlin, who is in the AI Writing for Authors group, and he has some amazing contributions there. So I'll link to this original post in the link down below. You can also join the group. It's a great group to be in. But here is the basics of this new workflow. And I say new, I'm sure some of you have already been doing something similar, but it was kind of a new concept to me and one that I actually really appreciated. So the first thing is to take whatever AI you used to create entire drafts of your chapter, like just the whole thing as quickly and as easy as possible. We're not worrying too much about the quality of the draft, okay? And for this, Sudowrite is actually a really great tool to do this. And this is an old book of mine that I was working on in Sudowrite a while ago. So I've got all of the beats already listed here. And from these beats, we can create the actual chapter. The one I would recommend using if you are using Sudowrite is when you come down here to all of the different ways to write this chapter. Most accurate would be the one that I am most concerned with, because we don't actually need to worry about the quality of the prose for this one. We only need to worry about, is it actually following the beats fairly closely, and most accurate is going to be your best bet for that. Everything up to this point, the creation of your outline, the creation of your beats, all of that should probably be done just the normal way you would do them. You can create your own beats. You can use Sudowrite to help create your beats for you. You can create your own outline, do whatever you normally do for all of that pre-work that goes into this. And then once you have the beats ready and you're ready to write a chapter, just hit generate chapter and it will start actually writing the chapter. Now, once it's written your chapter, the next step is I would go through and read it over briefly. You don't have to read it in depth, and you don't have to edit anything yet either. You just want to get a sense for what it did and what it chose to do, all the creative decisions it made. That's why I think using most accurate in this case, which is under the hood using GPT-4, that is why I recommend doing that, because then it'll stick to your story beats pretty well. Unlike some models, which will kind of just go in a completely opposite direction, especially if you're using them in Sudowrite. So here's how it starts. Today would be the day I raised the dead for the first time, and my stomach twisted with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Alara, my best friend in all of Bright Soul Academy, sat beside me in the mess hall, picking at her plate of roasted chicken and vegetables. The high vaulted ceiling and grand chandeliers overhead cast flickering shadows on the hundreds of students who filled the long rows of tables below. Conversations and laughter echoed through the cavernous space, punctuated by the clatter of silverware and plates. Not too bad for GPT-4, could be better, but then, it goes on, and still very much an AI-generated thing, right? So now we come to the sweet spot where we're going to change things up a bit. So we have the whole thing generated, but it's not good, right? And it would take us quite a bit of time to edit this to make it actually good. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to put this off to the side here. I'm going to create another just random word pad over here. And I'm going to enable a dictation software. The one that I use is Dragon Professional Individual. And it's not as good as some of the AI dictation softwares out there. But what it does have the advantage of is the fact that it can do real-time dictation. So for my purposes in actually showing you what's going on, it's going to make sense for me to actually bring that in here so you can kind of see it. So now if I speak into the mic, you get to see what I'm saying here on the screen. And there you have it, right? So we are creating this as we go. So from now, the trick is to kind of have on one hand the AI written text, and on the other hand have your dictation. Now, if you're using a real-time dictation software like Dragon Professional Individual like I have, you can just have it open in another screen like this. Or if you're using, say, OpenAI's Whisper, which is actually a really good model for dictation, those you have to record the audio separately. So I would have a recorder of some kind. It can be your phone, or it can be a recording to a file on your computer. And then once that file is generated, you can then run it through Whisper and actually get dictated prose out of it. But for just this example, I'm going to be showing you what it looks like to dictate directly into a file like this. using Dragon Professional Individual. And what we want to do is have here the AI on the left-hand side here, and I'm just going to dictate over it. I'm going to kind of read it as I'm going and take the little bits that I think are useful, but then kind of just write everything else in my own words. I'm not going to do too much here, but I am going to give you an example of what this actually looks like. Lyra, comma, you've barely touched your food, comma, end quote. Ilara said, comma, concern written all over her, period, open quote. You're not worried about the raising, are you? Question mark, close quote. New line, I pushed at my food, comma, with my fork, comma, my stomach tied up in knots, comma, unable to do anything about it, period. But I had absolutely no appetite, period. All I could feel was the mixture of anticipation and dread, period. New line. Ilara looked at me with continued concern as she sat beside me in the mess hall, comma, picking at her own plate of roast chicken and vegetables, period. All around us, comma, the high, comma, vaulted ceilings and grand chandeliers of Bright Soul Academy mess hall cast flickering shadows over the hundreds of students that surrounded us in neat rows of tables, period. New line. Conversations and laughter echoed through the space, comma, laughter that did nothing to ease my discomfort, period. New line. Today was the day that I would raise the dead for the first time. Okay, so obviously not perfect, and the dictation got a few things wrong, like it's translated Ilara as you Lara, and it didn't spell Lyra correctly. Those are things you could train Dragon Professional Individual to do properly, but overall, what we just got here is a much cleaner first draft, and I was able to get it down much faster than I would have had to do if I was just sort of coming up with it out of thin air. Much of the time spent writing when you're actually writing is just thinking of what you are going to say next, and there's long pauses. And what this does is it actually kind of breaks through that barrier a little bit, because you have something, you've got something that is somewhat workable, or at least has little parts that are workable. Like, for instance, I talked about the mess hall and picking out a plate of roast chicken and vegetables. I talked about the high vaulted ceiling and grand chandeliers and the hundreds of students. But I phrased it in a slightly more natural way, which is something that kind of came to me naturally as I was going through the process. I didn't really have to think about it too much. I just saw, oh yeah, I like vaulted ceilings and flickering shadows. And also, I was spending more time describing the Grand Hall, which is something that I probably would not have done naturally on my own because I kind of suck at writing descriptions. I tend to not do enough of it. And because ChatGPT is actually really good at descriptions, I was able to kind of meld the best bits of GPT with the best bits of my own writing, and I created this little bit here in far less time than it would have taken me to do otherwise. Now, what is so interesting about this workflow, and the reason that I actually think it's a really good idea, it's not necessarily because it'll save you time, because I think the whole process of integrating AI and then dictating it out loud, yes, it's going to be faster than doing it yourself the normal way. Even if you're dictating it, it's not going to be that fast. But the fact that I actually dictated the final words here raises an interesting thing here, and that is that even though we're using AI pretty heavily, I get full copyright of this text that I put down. A lot of people come to me and say, are you bothered that you can't get the full copyright of an AI written book? And first of all, the answer to that is I can probably actually get the copyright for it, because by the time I'm done with the book, I've modified it heavily enough that, yeah, I can probably call it my own. And first of all, a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell anyway. But if you do it this way, there is absolutely no doubt that you own 100% of this book, because you put everything down here. You actually wrote the words. You generated the final draft, okay? Everything about the final draft was generated by you through the dictation process. Now, you could, in a very splitting hairs legal situation, claim that this is a derivative work of AI, which is not copyrightable. But that's actually not going to work because you can derive whatever you want from public domain sources, and then you can still copyright anything that's derived from public domain sources. Just ask Walt Disney, right? So many of the early Walt Disney films and films still being made today are derived from public domain works. So since AI in its pure form, without any modification, is considered public domain, then you have absolute rights to create derivative works, which is essentially what this is, which means you own 100% of the copyright, and you just don't have to worry about that, which if you are worried about copyright in AI, then this might be the workflow for you because it gives you full copyright. Additionally, when you are uploading a book to Amazon, you now have, well, this isn't new, but there is this box to mark if you have used AI generated content. And you can say like some sections with extensive editing or the entire work with minimal or no editing. But this is only when the AI actually generates the words in the novel. If you generate the words yourself using dictation, then you do not have to click yes for this. You can just say, no, there was no AI generated content here. Because even though you are using AI for assistance, Amazon does not count that as AI generated content. And they have a whole policy here. If you hover over this in the dashboard, it says we define AI generated content as text, images, or translations created by an artificial intelligence based tool. And so they have a whole list of things that constitute what is AI assistance, what is AI generation, what do they feel is the difference. And basically, if you're using dictation to create your first draft, even if you were basing it heavily on a first draft that the AI wrote, you can actually hit AI assistance, which means you can just say no on this one and it will completely ignore that. Now, personally, I think there's not really any danger to say yes to this in Amazon. I've said this before, but the reason Amazon is just doing this is for information purposes only, and possibly for legal reasons in the future, in case the EU or the US or someone passes a law where they have to disclose such thing. Amazon is getting ahead of that so that they can disclose it if they have to, but I don't think they're going to do so unless legally required to do so. So that's just my thoughts on that. But if you are concerned about selecting yes for AI generated content here in Amazon, you can just use this workflow, and you not only can just select no here for AI generated content, but you also get 100% worry-free copyright of your book. That is really what makes this entire process pretty magical. And I think it's going to be a really great way to create content in the future for people. It's a really great way to get over that writer's block as well, if that's something that bothers you. Now, if you're getting value out of this content, I would like to invite you to actually join my membership, which you will find a link to below. As I'm recording this morning, I recorded my first ever live call we had over 50 people there present to actually participate in this thing. And we basically, I went over a couple of cool things in the membership area. We had a whole bunch of questions. I guided people through the process of writing a short story so they could get to it themselves and challenge them to do so here in February. There's a members only podcast where you get access to that recording so you can look over it later. You can also find the video recording here inside the membership area. But the members only podcast is actually really awesome because it allows you to take all of that stuff with you on the go, so you don't have to like log in and all of the hassle of actually coming into the membership area. Although there is a lot of cool stuff in here. Phase 1, the reader magnet, is what we're covering this month. Lots of cool videos in here. And then over here at the bottom, I put the challenge. This is the Zoom call that we had this morning as I filmed this. And that was a whole lot of fun, talking to people, actually answering questions and everything. And so if you are interested in seeing all of that content and being there when I have more calls like that, definitely check out the link below. There's a whole lot more that I can't even get into. You'll see it all on the page that I'll link to. And if you get any value out of this YouTube channel, I invite you to go there, because there's lots of stuff there that I do not talk about on this channel just because the YouTube algorithm wouldn't really favor it that well for whatever reason. So all of that stuff goes in the membership, like more information on storytelling and all of that. So definitely check that out, and I will see you in the next video.